The cargo hauler shook violently as it tore through Verdania's thick atmosphere. Red warning lights bathed the cockpit in an angry glow, and alarms screamed from every direction. Dar9 fought with the controls, all four arms working frantically to keep the ship from spinning completely out of control. The insectoid trader had been flying these routes for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of system failure. The planet's gravity pulled harder. The ship's nose dipped sharply, and through the viewport, Dar9 could see the forest rushing up to meet him. Thick, ancient trees covered the landscape like a green ocean. This was going to hurt. The impact came like a hammer blow. Metal screamed as the hull scraped against massive tree trunks. Branches shattered against the windshield. The whole ship lurched sideways, then forward, then slammed into the ground with a bone-rattling crunch. Sparks flew. Something exploded in the back. Then, finally, everything went quiet. Dar9 sat in the pilot's seat, breathing hard, checking to make sure all his limbs still worked. His antennae were ringing from the noise, but he was alive. That was more than he'd expected 10 seconds ago. Smoke filled the cabin, forcing him to move. He unbuckled and stumbled toward the emergency hatch. The forest outside was quiet. Too quiet. The crash should have sent birds flying, animals running. Instead, there was just an eerie stillness. Dar9's antennae twitched, picking up vibrations in the air. Something was out there. Then he heard it. A low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from deep underground. It wasn't mechanical. It was organic. Alive. And it sounded like pain. Every survival instinct Dar9 had screamed at him to stay near the ship. To activate the emergency beacon and wait for rescue. But something about that sound pulled at him. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was something else. Something sad. He grabbed a medical kit from the wreckage and followed the sound into the trees. The forest was dense here, with vines hanging from branches and roots breaking through the soil. Dar9 pushed through the undergrowth, his trader's clothes getting caught on thorns. The sound grew louder. Closer. Then the trees opened up into a small clearing and Dar9 froze. A Dracoth lay in the center of the clearing. Dar9 had seen pictures, of course. Every trader knew about the apex predators of Verdania. Dragon-like creatures that stood taller than most buildings, with scales harder than ship armor and claws that could tear through steel. They were the reason most cargo haulers avoided this planet entirely. The reason colonists built their settlements behind massive walls. But the pictures hadn't prepared him for this. She was enormous. Even lying on her side, wounded and bleeding, she was the most terrifying thing Dar9 had ever seen. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent quality, catching the light filtering through the trees. But that beauty was marred by the damage. Deep burns covered her flank, the kind made by plasma weapons. The wounds were bad. Fatal, probably. The smell of burned flesh hung in the air. Dar9 should have run. Should have backed away slowly and never looked back. But then he saw her eyes. They weren't filled with rage or hunger. They were filled with something Dar9 recognized, something that existed in every species across the galaxy. Desperation. Fear. Not for herself, but for something else. That's when he noticed the baby. Next to the massive dragon lay a tiny hatchling, no bigger than Dar9 himself. Its scales were dull, not yet developed into the brilliant armor of an adult. Its chest rose and fell in short, shallow breaths. The little thing was dying. The mother dragon saw Dar9 standing there. For a moment their eyes met and something passed between them. An understanding. Then, with what must have taken all her remaining strength, she lifted her enormous head and gently pushed the baby forward with her snout. Toward Dar9. The hatchling rolled limply across the ground, coming to rest at the trader's feet. It made a tiny sound, barely a whisper. The mother dragon pushed again, insistent. Then she made a sound that broke something inside Dar9's chest. It wasn't a roar. It was a plea. A mother begging a stranger to save her child. Dar9 looked down at the dying baby, then back at the mother. She watched him with those desperate eyes, too weak to do anything but beg. In that moment, it didn't matter that she could have killed him with one bite. It didn't matter that they were different species from different worlds. All that mattered was what Dar9 saw in her eyes. A mother's love. And that, Dar9 realized with a sinking heart, was universal. Dar9 knelt beside the tiny hatchling, his hands shaking. In 30 years of trading across the galaxy, he'd dealt with pirates, navigated asteroid fields, and survived a hull breach in deep space. But he'd never felt as helpless as he did right now, staring down at this dying baby. The little dragon's eyes were barely open. Its breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Dar9 could see its ribs through the thin scales. This wasn't just injury. This was starvation. He pulled out his emergency supplies. Every trader carried them. Protein bars designed to work with most carbon-based life forms. High-calorie paste that could keep you alive for weeks. Water purification tablets. All the basics. He unwrapped a protein bar and broke off a small piece, holding it near the hatchling's mouth. The baby didn't even look at it. Darnine tried the paste next, squeezing some onto his finger and touching it to the creature's lips. The hatchling turned its head away weakly. He tried mixing it with water, making it easier to swallow. Nothing worked. The baby rejected everything he offered. Behind him, the mother dragon watched. She couldn't move much anymore. The plasma burns had done too much damage. But her eyes tracked every movement, following her baby with an intensity that made Darnina's chest ache. She made small sounds, encouraging chirps that grew weaker each time. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. Darnine tried everything in his kit. Different food combinations. Different temperatures. He even tried chewing the food first, remembering that some species fed their young that way. The hatchling's breathing got shallower. Darnine pulled out his datapad with trembling hands and searched the database. He needed to understand what these creatures ate. The information came back quickly. Drakith hatchlings required a specific enzyme found in the blood of Verdanian megafauna. Large, six-legged beasts that weighed several tons and could crush a hovercar with one kick. The enzyme triggered something in the hatchling's digestive system, allowing it to process other foods. Without it, the baby would starve no matter what else it ate. The mother would normally hunt these beasts, tear them apart, and bring the meat back to her young. But she couldn't even stand. And Darnine? He looked down at his four thin arms, built for handling cargo containers and operating ship controls. Not for hunting massive predators. He stood and looked around the clearing as if the forest might offer some solution. Maybe there was a dead animal nearby. Maybe he could find something, anything that would work. But he knew the truth. Even if he found one of those massive beasts, he had no way to kill it. No weapons. No strength. Nothing. The mother dragon made a sound then that Darnine would never forget. It was soft, barely more than a whisper. A sound of acceptance. She knew she was dying. She'd made peace with that. But her eyes stayed locked on her baby, and in them, Darnine saw the one thing she couldn't accept. The one thing that was breaking her even as her body failed. She was going to watch her child die first. Darnine felt something hot on his face and realized he was crying. His species didn't cry often. Tears were a waste of water, his father used to say. But they came now, running down his chitinous cheeks as he looked at this mother and child, both slipping away. He thought about his own mother. Dead 15 years now. He thought about how she'd gone hungry during the shortage on their colony world, giving her rations to him and his siblings. That's what mothers did. They gave everything. Even when there was nothing left to give. The hatchling's breathing changed. It became irregular, stopping and starting. Darnine knew what that meant. Minutes now. Not hours. He grabbed his emergency beacon from his belt. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped it. The device was simple. One button. Press it and help would come. Eventually. He activated it and a small light began blinking. The signal would reach the colony, 3 days away at standard cruising speed. They'd send a rescue ship. It would arrive to find a dead traitor, a dead dragon, and a dead baby. But at least they'd come. Darnine sat down next to the hatchling and gently stroked its head. The scales felt rough under his fingers, not yet smoothed by age. The baby's eyes opened slightly, looking up at him. "I'm sorry," Darnine whispered. His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I tried everything. I don't know what else to do." The mother dragon made another soft sound. Not angry. Just sad. She understood. He tried. Sometimes trying wasn't enough. The forest was quiet around them. Just the sound of labored breathing and the gentle rustle of wind through leaves. Darnine closed his eyes, unable to watch any more. Then he heard it. Faint at first but growing louder. The hum of an engine. Coming fast. Darnine's eyes snapped open. That was impossible. No one could have received his signal and arrived this quickly. It had been less than 20 minutes. But the sound was unmistakable. A hover engine running hard, getting closer by the second. The mother dragon lifted her head slightly, ears perked. Even the hatchling seemed to sense something, its eyes opening a fraction wider. Through the trees Darnine saw lights. Vehicle lights. Moving toward them at a speed that seemed reckless through this dense forest. Then a hover truck burst into the clearing, older model, painted green and covered in dents. It slid to a stop, sending dirt flying. The door opened and someone jumped out. A human. The hover truck looked like it had been through a war. Dents covered every panel, the paint was faded and chipped, and one of the side panels was held on with actual rope. But the engine sounded strong and it had gotten here impossibly fast. The door swung open before the vehicle fully stopped and a man jumped out. He was human, maybe in his mid-40s, wearing dirt-stained work clothes and heavy boots. A faded cap covered brown hair streaked with gray, and his hands were calloused from years of hard labor. He grabbed a large medical kit from the passenger seat and started walking toward them. Not running. Not hesitating. Just walking with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Darnine stood up quickly, all four arms waving. Stop. Don't come closer. That's a Drakith. The human didn't slow down. Name's Jake Carter, he called out, his voice calm and level. Got your emergency beacon. What's the situation here? Darnine couldn't believe what he was seeing. This human was walking straight toward a dragon. An apex predator. A creature that could bite him in half without effort. Are you insane? That thing could kill you. Jake glanced at the mother dragon, then back at Darnine. Could be dying by the looks of it. He knelt down next to the massive creature, setting his kit on the ground. Easy there, mama. Let me take a look at you. The mother dragon's head lifted slightly. Her eyes, previously dull with exhaustion, suddenly focused on this new arrival. She could kill him. One snap of her jaws. One swipe of her claws. But something stopped her. Maybe it was weakness. Or maybe it was something else. Jake's hands moved over her wounds without fear. He examined the plasma burns carefully, his jaw tightening. These are bad. Real bad. Who did this to you, girl? His voice was soft, almost gentle. Like he was talking to an injured farm animal, not a creature that had terrorized colonies across a dozen worlds. The dragon watched him. Darnine saw something change in her eyes. Recognition maybe. Or perhaps just the realization that this strange, small creature wasn't a threat. Jake kept talking to her in that low, soothing voice as he checked her injuries. The dragon's breathing settled. She didn't relax exactly, but she stopped looking like she might attack. Then Jake turned his attention to the hatchling. He moved closer to the baby and Darnine saw the mother tense. But Jake just kept talking. Hey there, little one. You're not doing so good, are you? He picked up the tiny dragon carefully, supporting its head. His practiced hands felt along its ribs, checked its breathing, looked at its eyes. Protein deficiency, Jake said, more to himself than anyone else. His face grew serious. How long has he been like this? Hours, Darnine managed to say. I tried feeding him everything I had. He won't eat. Jake nodded, unsurprised. Wouldn't? Drakith hatchlings need specific nutrients. Their systems won't process regular food without it. He stood and walked back to his truck, still carrying the baby. The mother dragon made a worried sound, but Jake called back. It's okay, mama. I'm going to help him. Darnine followed, his mind racing. How do you know about Drakith biology? The Galactic Council keeps that information restricted. Jake pulled out a large metal canister from a storage box in his truck bed. Council doesn't own knowledge. Just controls who can access their databases. He set the baby down gently and opened the canister. Inside was a thick, dark liquid. Been studying these creatures for 5 years. They're magnificent. Misunderstood, but magnificent. You study them? Darnine couldn't keep the shock from his voice. They're apex predators. They've killed colonists. So have deer when they panic, Jake said, measuring out the liquid into a container. Doesn't make them evil. Just makes them animals. He added water to the mixture, stirring it carefully. Most of those deaths? Humans wandering into nesting grounds. Getting between mothers and babies. We do stupid things sometimes. He brought the container to the hatchling's mouth. The baby didn't react at first. Then Jake touched the liquid to its lips and something changed. The hatchling's nostrils flared. Its eyes opened wider. And then it latched onto the container with desperate hunger. The baby drank. And drank. And kept drinking. Darnine watched in amazement as color began returning to the tiny dragon's scales. The dull, lifeless gray shifted toward a healthier green. Its breathing deepened, became more regular. The transformation happened in minutes. What is that? Darnine asked. Synthetic enzyme compound, Jake said, watching the baby carefully. Based on the blood chemistry of native megafauna. Been working on it for months. Use it for wildlife rehabilitation. He smiled as the hatchling finished the container and made a small, satisfied chirp. First time I've used it on a Drakith though. Glad it works. The mother dragon made a sound. Not threatening. Not pained. Something else entirely. Jake stood and walked back to her, showing her the baby in his arms. The hatchling was moving now, squirming with energy it hadn't had minutes before. "Your boy's going to be fine," Jake told her. "But you and I need to talk about these wounds." Darnine found his voice again. "How are you not afraid? That's a Dracoth. She could kill you where you stand." Jake looked back at him, and Darnine saw something in the human's eyes. Not stupidity. Not recklessness. Just certainty. "Fear doesn't save lives," Jake said simply. "Action does." Jake didn't leave. That first day stretched into night, and he set up camp right there in the clearing. He pulled camping gear from his truck like he'd planned this all along. A tent, sleeping bag, portable lights, cooking supplies. Everything organized and ready. Darnine watched him work, still trying to understand what kind of person would willingly stay next to an injured Dracoth. "Shouldn't you go home? Get proper medical equipment." Jake shook his head while unpacking supplies. "Moving her would kill her. Those burns go deep. We do this here or we don't do it at all." He pulled out what looked like veterinary tools, modified with extra grips and reinforced handles. "Besides, I've got everything I need." The next morning Jake began the real work. He laid out his supplies on a clean tarp. Surgical thread, bottles of antiseptic, syringes filled with antibiotics, and tools that Darnine recognized as farming equipment that had been carefully adapted for medical use. "Human medicine started in barns," Jake explained, cleaning a curved needle that looked like it was meant for sewing leather. "Couple hundred years ago, our doctors learned their trade by treating livestock. Horses, cattle, sheep. We figured out how to stitch wounds and set bones before we ever had fancy hospitals." He threaded the needle with practiced ease. "Guess old habits die hard." He approached the mother dragon slowly, talking the whole time. "All right, Mama, this is going to hurt. I won't lie to you. But you need these wounds closed or infection will kill you." He knelt beside her massive form. "I need you to trust me." The dragon's yellow eyes followed him. She could have ended him with one bite. Her teeth were the size of Darnina's arms. But when Jake pressed his hands against her burned scales, she just closed her eyes and waited. Darnine watched in complete disbelief as Jake began stitching the wounds. His hands moved with steady confidence, each stitch placed perfectly. The dragon's muscles tensed and she made low sounds of pain, but she never moved. Never tried to stop him. "That's a good girl," Jake murmured, working on a particularly deep burn. "You're doing great. Almost through this section." It took hours. Jake worked through the morning, stopping only to wipe sweat from his forehead and drink water. The mother dragon breathed heavily but remained still. Darnine realized what he was witnessing. This creature, this apex predator, understood that Jake was helping her. Somehow, across all the barriers of species and language, they had an agreement. "The Galactic Council says Dracoth are too dangerous for contact," Darnine said quietly, watching Jake clean another wound. "They've banned humans from interacting with them." Jake laughed, the sound echoing through the forest. "Councils never met a determined farmer then." He applied antibiotic gel to a stitched section. "They sit in their stations making rules about creatures they've only seen in reports. Me. I live here. I see them." He looked at the mother dragon with genuine affection. "She's not dangerous. She's a mom protecting her kid. I understand that just fine." Over the 3 days, Darnine saw something remarkable happen. The hatchling, growing stronger from Jake's formula, began following the human everywhere. When Jake worked on his mother, the little dragon would sit nearby, watching with curious eyes. When Jake ate, the baby would curl up by his feet. When Jake slept, the hatchling nestled against his back. On the second evening, Jake was checking the mother's bandages when the hatchling climbed onto his lap. The human didn't push it away. Instead, he scratched under its chin while working with his other hand. The baby made a sound, a deep rumbling that Darnine eventually recognized as purring. "You like that, little guy?" Jake smiled, his fingers finding the spot behind the hatchling's ear ridge. The purring got louder. "Yeah, I thought you might." The mother dragon watched this with half-open eyes. If she objected to a human handling her baby, she didn't show it. If anything, she seemed content. Jake taught Darnine how to mix the formula, how to check the hatchling's vitals, how to change the mother's bandages. "You'll need to know this," he said. "I can't stay forever. Got a farm to run." "You're leaving them?" Darnine asked. "Eventually. But not until she can hunt again." Jake checked the mother's wounds. The stitches were holding. No signs of infection. Another week, maybe 2. Then she'll be strong enough to take care of her boy. On the third night, they sat by the fire while the dragons slept. The mother's breathing was stronger now. Deeper. The hatchling was twice the size it had been when Jake arrived, growing at the incredible rate that young Drakkith were known for. "You humans are insane," Dar9 said, watching Jake clean his tools by firelight. "Completely insane." Jake grinned, that easy human smile that Dar9 was beginning to recognize. "Maybe. Probably, actually." He held up a surgical needle, examining his repair work. "But we get results. And sometimes that's all that matters." The fire crackled. The forest hummed with night sounds. And in that clearing, a human, an alien trader, and 2 dragons shared a peace that the Galactic Council said was impossible. On the 4th morning something changed. Dar9 woke to the sound of movement, heavy and deliberate. He scrambled out of his sleeping bag and froze at what he saw. The mother Drakkith was standing. Not just lifting her head. Actually standing on all 4 legs, her massive body rising from the ground where she'd lain for days. Her muscles trembled with effort and she moved slowly, carefully testing her weight. But she was up. Jake emerged from his tent, coffee cup in hand, and smiled. "There she is. Knew you could do it, Mama?" The dragon took a few tentative steps. Her legs were shaky but they held. The stitches across her flank pulled tight but didn't tear. Jake had done his work well. She turned her head toward him and in her eyes, Dar9 saw something that made his chest tight. Gratitude. The hatchling, now nearly 3 times the size he'd been when Jake arrived, bounded around his mother's feet. He chirped and squeaked with excitement, his little wings flapping uselessly. The mother lowered her head and nuzzled him, a rumbling purr coming from deep in her chest. Her baby was healthy. She was standing. They were going to survive. Jake started packing his equipment. He moved methodically, organizing his tools, rolling up bandages, storing and used supplies. The work was done. Time to go home. Dar9 helped him carry items to the truck. "What will you tell people? About spending 3 days out here with them?" Jake shrugged. "That I was helping an injured animal. Same as I'd do for any creature on my land." He secured a toolbox in the truck bed. "People around here know me. They won't ask too many questions." The mother dragon watched them work. She'd settled back down to rest, but her eyes tracked Jake's every movement. The hatchling, however, seemed to sense something was wrong. He stayed close to Jake, making small worried sounds. When everything was packed, Jake walked back to the dragons one last time. The hatchling immediately pressed against his legs, and Jake knelt down to scratch behind his ear ridges. "You be good for your mama, you hear? Eat everything she brings you. Get big and strong." The baby dragon chirped, not understanding the words but sensing the goodbye. Then the mother Drakkith did something that made Dar9's breath catch. She rose to her feet again, moving with more strength than before. She approached Jake slowly, her massive form towering over the human. Jake didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just waited. The dragon lowered her enormous head, moving with deliberate care, and pressed her snout gently against Jake's chest. Not hard. Not threatening. The gesture was unmistakable. A bow. In every culture Dar9 knew, across hundreds of worlds, lowering one's head to another was a sign of respect. Of gratitude. Jake reached up and stroked the scales on her snout. His hand looked impossibly small against her massive head. "You're welcome, Mama," he said softly. "Take care of your boy. Live a good long life." The dragon held the position for a moment longer, then lifted her head and made a sound. Not a roar. Something gentler. A goodbye in her own language. Jake climbed into his truck, started the engine and drove away. The hatchling tried to follow, but his mother called him back with a sharp bark. As the truck disappeared through the trees, Dar9 saw the baby dragon sit down and watch the direction Jake had gone, still confused about why his friend was leaving. 6 weeks later, Dar9 returned to Verdania. His ship had been repaired and he'd taken a cargo contract that brought him back to the planet. But he'd also loaded his hold with supplies. Tools, seeds, equipment. Items Jake had mentioned needing during their long nights by the fire. He found Jake's farm nestled in a valley, surrounded by golden fields. As his small shuttle approached, Dar9 saw something that made him circle back for a second look. 2 dragons lay at the edge of Jake's property, near the tree line. The mother and her hatchling, though the baby wasn't so little anymore. He was the size of a hovercar now, all gangly limbs and oversized wings. They weren't hunting. Just resting in the sun. Dar9 landed near the farmhouse. Jake came out, wiping his hands on his work pants. "Dar9. Didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Brought supplies," Dar9 said, gesturing to his shuttle. "And I wanted to see how things turned out." Jake led him around the property. Dar9 saw the dragons regularly. The young one played in the fields, chasing flying insects and practicing his pounces. The mother watched from the hills, alert but calm. Jake's livestock, strange six-legged creatures native to Verdania, grazed peacefully. They didn't seem afraid of the dragons at all. They visit every few days, Jake explained. The little guy likes to play. His mama keeps watch, makes sure nothing bothers my animals. Works out well for everyone. Darnine stood at the fence line, watching the young dragon chase butterflies through the tall grass. The Galactic Council won't like this. When they find out. Jake leaned against the fence, a piece of grass between his teeth. They don't have to like it. Out here we help our neighbors. Doesn't matter if they've got 2 legs for legs or wings. That night in his ship, Darnine wrote a report. Not an official one for his trading company. This was different. He sent it to the Xenobiology Network, to the cultural exchange programs, to anyone who might listen. He wrote about what he'd seen. About a human who showed no fear. About a dragon who trusted. About the bond that formed when compassion crossed the boundaries of species. And he asked the question that had been haunting him for weeks. Why were humans the only ones who looked at a dangerous creature and saw a neighbor in need? Why did they help when every other species fled? The answer, Darnine wrote in his final paragraph, was simple. Humans didn't see limits to compassion. They didn't calculate risk versus reward when someone needed help. They just acted. And maybe that was their greatest strength. Not their technology or their weapons or their ships. Just their stubborn, impossible, wonderful refusal to accept that some beings weren't worth saving. In the morning he said goodbye to Jake and lifted off. As his shuttle climbed he looked down one last time. Jake was in his fields, and the young dragon was walking beside him, matching his pace. Above them the mother circled, keeping watch. A human and his dragon neighbors. Impossible by all galactic standards. And yet there they were.